Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. Thank you for joining us again this week. I hope you're all doing well. We have another important show to share with you today. I'm here with Mr. Dwayne Green and Tony Lynch. Dwayne is the general manager at Terra Garden Chapel, and Tony Lynch is the area manager at Terra Garden Chapel, which is a dignity memorial provider. We're going to be talking about funeral expenses, pre-planning, and everything that you need to know for pre-planning for your end-of-life needs. So, let me start with you, Mr. Green.
Yes.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about Terra Chapel Garden, the history of Terra Chapel, where you're located, and how you got into this business.
Well, I've been in the business over 25 years. It's truly a ministry for myself. I started off at 14 years of age in a small town and has been blessed with being in the hierarchy of various different companies, general manager of other companies, and now with Terra Gardens Chapel, Dignity Memorial Provider, general manager of Terra Gardens Chapel and Parkway Gardens Chapel, and serving our community in Clayton County.
And where are they all located?
Terra Gardens Chapel is at 681 North Avenue in Jonesboro, Georgia. Parkway Chapel is in Forest Park, 1000 Forest Parkway.
Okay. And for those of you listening in our Phoenix or Gulf Coast area or other markets, please stay tuned. I've worked in hospice for a long time, as you know, if you've listened to the show in the past, and it's not always a topic you want to talk about, but we are here with Better Living to inform and educate you about all aspects of senior living and help you live better. And so please stay with us, because the key to everything in life is preparing yourself and not waiting till the crisis occurs. You can make better decisions and you can plan much better if you are educated prior to when that need arises. Wouldn't you say, Mr. Green?
Absolutely. I mean, death is something that we don't all like to talk about, to discuss over the dinner table, but it's something that needs to be planned. We plan for everything else in life. If you want true benefits, there are benefits with pre-planning. One of the great benefits is locking yourself into a specific price point that particular time that you plan on those services.
And the gift that you give to your families.
Absolutely.
When you have pre-planned or communicated your desires, wants, and needs.
Absolutely. Taking the stress off of them.
Exactly. And at that time in someone's life, the least amount of stress possible is you're giving a gift. It really, truly is a gift to your family. I think about my 92-year-old grandmother. Mm-hmm. I come from a long line of stubborn, independent, strong-willed women. I don't know if you could tell. But we called her Nana. She was about 5'2". Mm-hmm. She must have weighed 92 pounds, soaking wet. And she had everything planned down to the music that she wanted played in the church, and what dress she was going to wear, and where everything she owned was going to go. And I would go to her home and she'd say, "What do you want, Jeannie?" I'd say, "I refuse to talk about this, Nana." But what a gift she gave to us, because when family members aren't clear about what the desires, wants, and needs are of the loved one that has passed, it is such a crisis time.
Yes.
People aren't on their best behavior.
And it creates a lot of
well.
tension. There's already a lot of tension at the table, at the arrangements table, And, by doing so, you just lessen the burden of sorrow, for your loved ones. Mm-hmm. And that's truly the ultimate gift. You spoke of gifts. And that's truly the ultimate gift that you can give to your loved one.
So let's talk about the typical, and I know there's never such thing as typical, but walk us through maybe a story of what you see often when people come and visit you and where they're at in the process and how you help them.
Well, first of all, in these days and times, majority of people, in our age bracket, we're sort of in a sandwich generation here. And what I mean by a sandwich generation, like myself, taking care of an 82-year-old mother. Okay, and then I have older kids that are still somewhat in my pocket that I'm still taking care of.
And you will be for a long time, from what I hear.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm saying, for the lack of better terms, by a sandwich generation. And if you're not prepared, in this journey, for death, you have to. If I didn't make some type of preparation at that time for my 82-year-old mother, which is already taken care of, I mean, everything is spelled out, you can find yourself in a complete whirlwind. I've seen family sisters. I can just recall just the other week where two sisters, they're just at each other. I mean, you can tell that there's a true breakdown there. And their mother had passed, and it was just awful to see.
And it's displaced.
Yes.
It's the grief and the anger sometimes of losing a loved one when you're not ready. It doesn't mean you're a horrible person. It's just the crisis situation you're in and the emotions that are so strong, and you don't know what to do with them. So as always, we always hit the people we're closest to. But truly, you never want to talk about hospice. And I've worked in hospice for a long time.
Exactly.
You never want to talk about funeral planning. You never want to talk about not being here anymore. And I didn't even like having those conversations with my grandmother. But I'm so grateful that I did. Each and every song we listened to in the church had bigger meaning because she chose it. And everything she chose for the funeral and the burial had meaning because she chose it. She went and took us
exactly.
to the funeral home to do the planning. And although that was difficult, and it was years before, it really and truly was a gift and helped us all throughout that crisis when we did lose her.
It's something about those grandmothers, isn't it? I mean, they really had hindsight on my grandmother also. She did go through the process of cemetery planning. They had those nickel and dime policies, if you will. I'm sure you remember where they paid on those nickel and dime policies, and it might add up to maybe $1,000, $2,000. A quarter here, a nickel here, and that person came around came around to collect every month, a nickel and a dime. And that's how it came about.
Yeah. And I think we've lost a little bit of that now. Yeah. It's more avoidance and denial, or from what I see anyway in the industry a lot. So how do we change that?
Well, awareness. We have to create an awareness, working together with hospice, and create an awareness and educate folks as to what to do as far as pre-planning. For the funeral and their cemetery needs.
And let's talk a little bit about what are the typical needs, what is the typical cost, and again, I know there's no typical, but how do you walk folks through the decision-making process?
Well, first of all, we would provide, with Dignity Memorial, we have counselors, okay? We have what we call family service counselors. Well, let's start off with the family service counselors. Family service counselors would sit down with, your family and pre-plan the entire funeral from A to Z. Okay, they would go over the pricing structure, your merchandise needs, from A to Z.
And do you have everything unbundled, or do you have packages to make it easier?
We have plans that do make it a lot easier with Dignity.
Because I would think with all of the different things, the simpler the better.
Exactly. And our whole thing with Dignity is to lighten the burden for your loved one. So upon entry, we have plans that are set out. Our particular plans are called Legacy, Heritage, Honor, and Tribute. Within those plans, we outline all merchandise which is included, grandchild and child care and grandchild protection, bereavement travel, which we will help your loved ones with their travel travel plans, hotel, rent-a-car, etc. If you have members from that live abroad, let me back up to grandchild and child care protection, where we would bury your children and your grandchildren, God forbid if this happen, but this does happen, we will bury them free of charge up until the age of 21, as long as they're still remaining in the house.
Charge.
Free of charge. If you buy any one of those plans that I outlined.
Wow, that's great. And well, I've sort of neglected you over here, Tony, Mr. Lynch. You're the area manager.
Yes.
And what is that? What's your role?
My role is we've got 34 locations in the Atlanta metro area, and I'm basically responsible for managing those locations and making sure that we're providing the best service possible to the community. So we have 13 cemeteries and several funeral homes throughout Atlanta metro area, which we can provide from start to finish service with the family, from the funeral home and the services that we provide there to your final resting place at in-ground burial mausoleum, or if you want cremation, we've got that as well.
And let's talk about that. What I don't want to say trends, but growing up, you got buried. And now there are different options available, and people are choosing like cremation more and more. Is that correct?
That is correct. The trend in the United States is going more towards cremation. But regardless of the disposition, whether you are buried, embalmed and buried, or cremated, you want your family to have a final place to pay tribute to you, to come visit you, to remember you.
That's so important.
It's your legacy that you're leaving behind, regardless of how your body is, the disposition of your body. You want your family to be able to remember you. You want your grandchildren to be able to come with their kids and say, "This was my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
This was my grandfather."
And look
Absolutely.
At the life dates and be with that person, whatever, to memorialize them.
Absolutely.
Right. So there's a rising trend in cremation versus burial. What percentages would you say right now people are choosing to continue the burial versus the cremation?
Well, in our area in the southeast, it's a lot lower than, say, the Northwest. The Northwest, our market there is as high as 75%.
Wow, cremation?
Cremation.
Wow.
And here we're probably around 28 to 35%. So it has to do with the trends and the customs in the different areas of the United States. And we're traditionally lower, being in the Bible Belt. Mm-hmm. But again, we can provide whatever services that each individual wants for themselves. It's a celebration of life whenever we do a funeral. You can have a party if you want to. We have catering. We have the ability to do it at the funeral home, at your church, at a catering hall. Wherever you want that celebration to be, we are there. We are your partner.
And now you mentioned you have 34 I have so many questions. I can't get them all out at the same time. And I thought a show about funeral homes might be tough to have. You mentioned that you have 34 locations throughout Atlanta Metro, but you're all over North America. How many locations total does Dignity Memorial?
We have almost 2,000 locations in North America. We're in Canada as well, and almost every state, and Puerto Rico.
And so one thing that you said, because that's very large, are you all one of the largest?
We are the largest death care provider in the world.
Wow.
And we definitely have a network, the Dignity Memorial Network, where if you live here in Atlanta and we have a transient society and you end up moving to Houston and you had pre-planned in Atlanta, you may not want to have your final disposition and funeral here in Atlanta. You can transfer that pre-arrangement to Houston.
I love that, because that was another one of my questions. I think something that holds people back is they don't want to plan because life changes.
Absolutely.
So what options y'all give, because you're so large and all over the country and the world, that would help me make a decision to pre-plan. That's great.
It's one of the best gifts you can give your family, regardless of how transient you are.
Now, you mentioned funeral homes as well. So you have the funeral home and the burial place, the memorial gardens and cemeteries. So do you bundle packages? Does that help with cost because you can do everything from start to finish?
With our sister locations, funeral and cemetery, we do have some locations that are what we call a combo. For example, Georgia Memorial is a combo, and it has a funeral home on site at the cemetery. So they're able to start you from the funeral arrangements and work with you on the packages there. And on a pre-need basis, we fund that with an insurance product. And so you have an insurance product that will back that at today's price. And, you know, there's always a cost of insurance when you're depending on how long you pay that out. But again, you're protected from day one. And then on the cemetery side, we do have packages that with you staying with us, we allow you some discounts and added value for the family by not having to go and traipse across Atlanta to get from the funeral home to the cemetery.
Right. Wonderful. Now, Mr. Green, you talked a little bit about national transferability. Is that what I was just talking with Mr. Lynch about, that you can transfer anywhere
Correct.
throughout the country?
Yes.
I see such a benefit in that. I think that's fantastic.
It's awesome.
Not to put y'all on the spot, because I know you work in the Atlanta market, but we do air out in Phoenix as well. Do you know, location-wise, how many or any locations that we have out there with Dignity Memorial?
There are many locations like there are in Atlanta in the Phoenix area. And a matter of fact, the Phoenix market is a part of a grouping of markets, major markets, that we are a sister market to. There is one senior manager that is over the Phoenix market and the Atlanta market. And so we all work together. We come up with common practices to help the larger markets.
So again, if you are looking to pre-plan for end-of-life expenses, you can contact Mr. Lynch or Mr. Green in Georgia at 770-471-7171, and they can connect you to the appropriate contact person in your market, if it's Phoenix or the Gulf Coast or New Orleans, because we tape in lots of different markets.
You can also go to dignitymemorial.com, and there is a location locator that you can put the zip code, and it will give you the closest Dignity Memorial location.
Okay, and that's www.dignitymemorial.com. Wonderful. Mr. Lynch, you also talked about, is it Mr. Lynch or should I say Dwayne? You also talked about grandchild protection, and we touched
Correct.
on that, but I want to go back to it because it seems like a true benefit. So tell me a little bit about how that program works again.
Well, it's very simple. You pick out any one of the plans that we have, and that particular benefit comes attached to that, where up until the age of 21, we would bury your children and your grandchildren
For free?
Yes.
If you bought a package for yourself?
They would in turn receive that same plan free of charge.
Okay. And you mentioned 4 plans. Legacy, Heritage, Honor, and Tribute.
Correct.
Did I get those right?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't you describe what is the Legacy plan?
Legacy is our premier plan that we have, and we just have each one would go down in increments. Legacy, you're looking at the highest price plan in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $9,000, depending on what $9,000 to
$10,000.
Correct.
Okay. And what is that? The difference is the type of casket.
The only thing that really differs is the casket.
Okay.
Okay. You have your higher end units. I call them. I refer to them as units sometimes. You have your higher end units, which is your bronze and your coppers. Your in your wood category, your mahoganies would be in that particular category.
Okay.
And then it just goes down to different segments of units.
So versus Heritage, which your unit would be what?
Would be at the next level down, which possibly would be a 16 gauge. Okay. Then it would go down to from 16 gauge to 18 gauge to 20 gauge.
And what does gauge mean? I don't have any idea what you're talking about right now.
You're just talking about the consistency of the metal.
I see. Okay.
The thickness of the metal.
I see. And is it mostly the way it looks, or are there other reasons why someone would choose that?
Yes, it is. Aesthetically, you have some that have swingy handlebars. You have some that have stationary handlebars. You have some that have inner panels with scriptures in them. Some of them come with velvet interior versus creped interior.
Okay.
Some have urn-shaped corners versus square corners.
Okay. Yeah. And so is Tribute the least expensive? Did we?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what does that package go for typically?
In the neighborhood of $7,500. Yes.
Okay. So you're really looking at 4 different choices or options for packages that range from $7,500 to $10,000.
Correct.
So depending on what your preferences are or the aesthetic features you're looking for in your unit or casket, it's only about a $2,500 difference.
And then we have also Plan A.
Plan A?
Yes.
I'm Mr. Lynch is chomping at the bit. Tony, why don't you tell me what Plan A is?
Well, Plan A is a plan that we've put together for families that may not be able to put forth as much money on an at-need basis. And so we're there, and we want to serve the community. So we've put together a very simple plan with all the bells and whistles of a traditional funeral that is at a lower price, and it's under $5,000.
That's wonderful.
And that's a traditional burial service with embalming service and so forth. We do have the same kind of packages for our cremation families.
Yeah, I want to get to the cremation too. There's so much to talk about. Who knew?
Yeah.
But we are running short on time, so we want to talk about cremation. We want to talk about your compassion assistance program, your bereavement support. You have all kinds of benefits to working with you that I had no idea were offered through funeral homes and memorial gardens or cemeteries. So, but first, let me just give your information again, and when we come back after our break, we'll talk about more of that information. Again, if you are in the need of pre-planning for end of life, please contact Tony or Dwayne at 770-477-7171 in Jonesboro, Georgia. They have 34 locations throughout Atlanta, but they are part of Dignity Memorial, which has 2,000 locations throughout North America and all over the world as well, correct?
It's mostly North America and some Caribbean areas.
Okay, and you can find out more about locations near you if you go to www.dignitymemorial.com. So stay with us, because after the break, we have a lot more to talk about regarding cremation, compassion assistance service, bereavement, and more of the ins and outs of pre-planning. Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. We are back. I'm Jeannie Pete. You're listening to Better Living. Thanks for staying with us today. I know it's a tough topic to talk about pre-planning needs and funeral expenses, but I applaud you all for continuing to listen to me and Mr. Lynch and Mr. Green, Tony and Dwayne.
Thank you.
Because we have some more important information to share with you. And again, the purpose of this show is to inform and educate you prior to the crisis occurring. So let's just kind of recap what we talked about prior to the break, that there's all different packages available for folks that have pre-planning needs.
Absolutely.
And they range from about $7,500 to $10,000, correct?
Correct.
And the big difference is just more about the casket or the unit and the features and aesthetic look of it that people will use to determine what package they want or is best for them.
The contents of the packages truly remain similar. I mean, pretty much the same, yes.
Okay. And then, Tony, you were talking about Plan A. Do you want to just kind of recap what Plan A is again?
Plan A is something that we put together to help out families in need. It's more of an at-need type package that is, it's got all the bells and whistles of a typical funeral. And we just do that at a highly discounted price to help out those families in need. As
a community service to give back
Absolutely.
To those that can't. And do they have to meet certain qualifications? Because you're going to have to show that you are in need, I would expect.
what we end up doing is we work with the families. Whenever the funeral director gets with the family, it's more of a consultative situation where we sit down with them, walk through the life that was lived, and talk to them about what that person would have wanted, since it's an at-need situation and they didn't pre-plan at that point.
And that's what planning is.
Exactly.
Because you're not pre-planning, so you're in crisis mode.
Exactly.
And you might not have what you need in order to take care of the last final expense.
And that's one of the benefits of pre-planning, is that you can prepare for what you absolutely want for your final wishes, and on time pay for that.
And over time, it's a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Than trying to come up with out of pocket. And then that creates issues like you had mentioned in our last segment about sisters arguing or family members arguing,
yes.
because all of a sudden you got to come up with a large dollar amount for most people in the United States these days in a short amount of time.
This is true.
But you did talk about the fact that you go through sort of a life review. I love that. And you give folks a chance to talk about their loved one. You know, it's not just a transaction. It sounds like you're really getting more to the heart of the matter to find out what would be the best fit for them. So that's nice.
Well, part of our values as a company, we instill to every last associate. And so we want to give respect, integrity, service excellence, and lifelong enduring relationship with that family. And so that's what we believe in, we stand by.
And that's so important, especially in this time of crisis. As a hospice worker, I've worked in hospice for many years. It's a really difficult time, and we have to allow people to not be at their best while we are at our best to help them. So that's wonderful. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about folks' choices when you are doing these life reviews and getting to know them. How do you help them in their decision between burial or possibly cremation? Because as we talked about, cremation is growing as a trend in the United States, but it might still be hard for people to decide.
A lot of people have chosen cremation due to the cost difference.
I wondered if it was a lot less.
On an at-need basis, it can be less than a traditional burial service. But then again, you can have just as much of a celebration, a grand celebration for that person, regardless of them being buried or cremated.
So what is the typical cost for a cremation? We're talking at need now because clearly there was no pre-planning. Well, not clearly, because you could still choose to do cremation.
You can still choose that
while
on a pre-planning.
But if you're at need and maybe you think you want a burial, but you're toying around with maybe cremation isn't such a bad thing, could be a great thing. How do you help them make that decision, and what is the difference in cost?
We do have what we call a direct cremation, where there's no services involved. It's just straight to the cremation disposition, and that can start at a little bit under $1,000 and go up from there. We have the same dignity packages on the cremation side as we do on the burial side. So we have packages as low as about $3,000, and they go up from there with the same legacy, honor, heritage, and tribute.
And so from 1,000 to 3,000, did I get that right?
That would be for 1,000 to 3,000 for, say, a direct cremation with minimal service or no service.
Okay. But if you want to have a funeral and a celebration, and explain to me, if someone gets cremated, what all do they get in the package? Do they still get somewhere to go, or they're just getting an urn to bring back with them?
They have a traditional service. You can have your loved one there present, and then the disposition be cremation. My mother-in-law in Detroit, we used a Dignity Memorial provider, and we wanted to see her one last time. So we had the same kind of funeral you would have regardless of disposition, and then after the service, she was cremated and given back to my wife.
That's great. Yeah.
And so you can have everything that you want, regardless of the disposition, exactly the same.
Viewing, visitation, and so on.
I see. And so I assume that's popular.
It's very popular.
Yeah, because you really want to say goodbye. And
you do. It was a great farewell for my mother-in-law.
Wow. Okay, great. I understand a little bit more now then. And that type of package, what would that run?
A package that we got was the legacy for my mother-in-law, which is the higher end package, and typically that could be around $7,000 to $10,000, depending on the location that you go to.
Even though you're being cremated versus getting a casket, it's still about the same cost.
Correct.
Okay,
it's because of the services that are provided.
Right.
For example, because you're having your loved one present, you still have to go through embalming. Because you're having your loved one embalmed for a service that you want that person present, it would be about the same as a burial type service.
I see. I'm much clearer now.
Then you have memorial service, just to piggyback off that. You have memorial services too, where the body is not present. So you can have a service in our chapel or church where the body is not present.
And how would that affect the cost?
It would still range. We have various different costs for that also.
Okay. But I imagine that would be a little less because you're not embalming.
That is absolutely correct.
I gotcha. So there's lots of choices, and you all will help consult and talk to them about their wants, needs, and desires, and the story about their loved one to decide what is best for them. And in this time of need, it is important to have somebody who can walk you through that process and help you through the emotions that you're going through so you can make the right decisions for you, your loved one, and your family.
Absolutely.
And on that note, let's talk about your compassion assistance. You mentioned that a while ago, and we really haven't touched on that. What is your compassion assistance?
Well, compassion assistance is where we have counselors that are certified. Any member of the family would be able to call a 1-800 number and speak to, one of those certified counselors.
At any time?
At any time.
Prior or after, if they've bought into a pre-planning situation?
It would be after they bought into the plan.
Post-bereavement. Oh, after you bought into the plan.
Yes. Now, also, once you create your pre-need, you can also, that service is also available.
Because there is a lot of pre-bereavement, anticipatory grief that goes on. So I imagine that would be a huge help and support for folks that are just struggling with end-of-life issues as a whole.
Yes, and that's available for any member of their family.
That's wonderful. And I know that you have bereavement and bereavement support, and we do also have Miss LaWanda Long, who is a chaplain with hospice that has worked closely with you and done a bereavement support group at Terra Chapel.
Yes, we offer.
Do you want to talk about that support group?
Well, she can tell you more about the support group itself, but we were just assisting Reverend Long with having Terra Chapel as her location.
I see.
Okay, and at no charge.
So, Reverend Long, walk us through the bereavement support. Who can attend? Because I know you work for hospice. Do they have to be going through the hospice, or is it open to the public? And how does that all work?
Yes, it's open to the public. You don't have to be on hospice. With our bereavement support group, it depends on the loss of a loved one. There are all types of bereavement support groups. Sometimes maybe a loss of job, loss of a pet, but ours is the loss of a loved one. And it's open to any member of the family or friends who are struggling. And what we've discovered with grief, although Mr. Green deals with the burial and the disposition of the body, we found out there's a lot of grief. The grief process really becomes acute following and sometimes chronic following the death of their loved one. So what we try to do is in the support group is to allow a safe space for them to share their grief. Grief should be shared. A lot of times people feel isolated or lonely and feel like there's something wrong with me. I've buried my loved one, it should be over. But that's when the process begins. And so what we try to do is provide this safe space for them to talk, share, and everybody grieves differently. There's not some set format. And fortunately at Terra Gardens, we had just a dynamic time there. I had it so set up, but the people just wanted to talk. And one of our participants was very nervous about coming to a funeral home. She asked me, why did you use a funeral home for bereavement support? But what happened, the fear left her, and she found out it was safe even in a funeral home. And it was just a great, great experience.
And I imagine that would prepare her for being at the funeral home after her loved one passed. And that, again, brings, a little bit of comfort, even though you're still grieving, because it's not so scary and sad.
Exactly. I want to add that one of the things that probably, softened their spirit was the aroma of freshly baked cookies.
Exactly. Every week he
the
provided cookies for us and coffee. And the good thing, they didn't have to come there to plan a funeral. They came there just for themselves. And they didn't have to do anything but just show up. And they told their stories with no judgment. They didn't have to say all the right things. Sometimes when you're around your family, your friends, in your church or your community, you want to put up this good face. We had the participants who felt safe enough to cry, to share, and to hear another person's story and to realize that they're not alone. And so, and they did it in a funeral home. And fortunately, Terra Gardens is absolutely beautiful. The facility is gorgeous. And I've been to several Dignity homes here in the Atlanta area, and they're all just so beautiful. And so when we met, we'll open up with each person talking and sharing, and we try to help build memorials. So we had some family members who were so afraid to maybe go into their loved one's room or to even talk about it, but we asked them to talk with us, to bring a picture, to bring something that's so important about their family members, and they brought it to our group. We had one lady to bring the flowers from her husband's funeral. She had put in a beautiful box, and she talked about the significance of the flowers. She wasn't able to go into a lot of details, but she could talk about the flowers. So we just, wherever they can start, we're there to listen.
And that's so important. I have a friend who lost her brother, and she just had the 1-year anniversary of his death. And she said to me, Jeannie, people think I'm crazy because he's been gone a year, and they think it's time for me to, just memorialize him and celebrate in his life. But I'm still grieving, and I don't know what to do because people think I should be done.
Right.
And so there's no parameters on when the death had to occur. If somebody needs the support of a bereavement support group, just to go and talk and air it out and get those emotions out, and I assume you have them journal,
yes.
And it's so healing. There is no time span on when their loved one passed, is there?
No, there's no time span. What we found that it goes from maybe acute grief to a grief that's sort of integrated into their lives, and it shapes them to a new, almost like a new way of living, where they know how to live and function with their loss versus being stuck in their grief. As a chaplain, I'm always trying to assess if someone has complicated grief or if they've gotten stuck. And so what we do in the journaling process, sometimes that can get them moving again. They can just write down how they're feeling instead of just holding it on the inside. And so during our bereavement support, we asked some of the participants to bring their journals if they want to share. And it seemed like they got some of their power back when they were able to write it and then to speak it out. And as they cried about it, the next time they journaled, they felt like they were moving forward. In fact, one gentleman, at the beginning part, he grieved so much he would just cry the whole time. But by the end of the 6-week session, he was at a better place. He could talk about some of the complications maybe he had with his sibling that he couldn't maybe talk in the family, but he can share that with us. And once you get that out, you're able to get that behind you and then move to the next step. So it's not really that it's over, but it becomes integrated in a more healthy fashion that you can live with the loss.
And do you share contact information with folks that go through the bereavement support group? Because is it a 6-week program?
Yes. Our program is a 6-week program, and we also, at the end of the 6 weeks, we give them referrals in case they want to do more bereavement support. And sometimes we have people who may need more intensive bereavement, and so we refer them to counselors. And that's why I try to come in my assessments to see where they are by the end of it. So, and we had such a great time at Terra Gardens at Mr. Green's location that the participants asked me, will we have another one? They wanted to continue. So we're going to have another one in the fall. And for those who were with us before, it's certainly open for them to come back. And then for those who have lost ones since that time, we invite them also to come.
And I understand this last 6-week session was held at Terra Chapel. And do you know when your next 6-week session is going to be held? And how do people get in touch with you, even if you don't have it set in stone yet? so that they can be put on the list? Because I know you like to keep the group small so that you can be intimate and help people through their grief.
The next session will be in the fall, and those dates I'll have to iron out with Mr. Green, but it'll be in the fall. But if you'd like to reach us, you can reach us at Homestead Hospice. Our local number is 678-966-0077.
And do they ask for you?
Yes, they can ask for me, or they can just leave a message that they would like to attend with our receptionist. They'd like to attend our bereavement support group, and she will get the information to me. And if you like to, if you're in the Arizona area, you can call 480-584-3734, and I can send some information by mail about our bereavement support group to them also.
Wonderful. So we don't have a date for the fall, but it will be in Georgia at the Terra Garden Chapel again in the fall. And it's a 6-week program. And I'm sorry if you answered, I don't recall your answer, so I'm going to ask you again. When folks go through these 6-week groups with other folks that are in the same boat, grieving the loss of a loved one and having a hard time getting back into a daily routine that is effective because they may be stuck, I imagine they get very close to the people that they're sharing with. And so do they end up sharing contact information, and then therefore they have an ongoing support system and probably new friends?
Oh, definitely. We've seen that happen. And we allow them to let it be a natural friendship to develop. So we've seen them share numbers or to call and ask how the other one is doing. So, yeah, that's a new support that comes out of our support group, but it's not something that's mandatory that you got to share numbers, but we allow them to do that on their own.
Wonderful. So, Mr. Green, do you also hold support groups through Dignity Memorial if someone just really can't wait till the fall, they want to have something to go to right now? Are there other support groups going on?
Yes, we offer that to various different hospice groups in other organizations.
So they can contact you, because I don't want to leave anyone. I know you run a wonderful group, Reverend Long, and so I recommend folks go through your groups, but I don't want to leave anyone who's grieving for the next few months either. And so they can contact you at 770-477-7171, and you can get them in touch with possibly a group that's going on sooner.
Correct.
And what other features do you offer through your compassion assistance program besides the bereavement support groups?
Well, just that. The compassion assistance program consists of certified counselors, if you will, that would assist any family member with their bereavement needs.
And it's like a hotline, right?
Correct.
So they can call at any time?
Correct.
And it's 24/7, middle of the night, it doesn't matter?
At any hour.
And you don't have to be going through a support group. It's just if you have made pre-planning arrangements through Dignity Memorial anywhere in the country,
Correct.
you're given this 800 number, and it's a hotline for any time you're sad, grieving, just need a little help or someone to talk to.
Yes.
I love that. I think that's just a fabulous service.
It really is.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and like I said, I wasn't quite sure I could get through a whole show talking about funeral expenses. You all are terrific. But what top 3 things do you want to leave the listeners with before we end the show today? Because you know what? If y'all stuck with us for this show, I applaud you, because it is a difficult topic, and it is so important to make these arrangements before the crisis occurs. So why don't you leave us with the top 3 things people should know?
Well, one of the things is pre-plan. Don't be afraid to pre-plan your loved one's services.
And have that communication.
Yes.
And it will start the ball rolling for coming out of denial and being comforted by the fact that you're going to be giving your loved one what they wish for.
This is true.
And that's a gift in and of itself. Anything else, Mr. Lynch? You've been sitting quietly over there. I have to call on you before we end the show.
Well, with regards to pre-planning, we touched upon it. You want to share those pre-plans with all of your loved ones. You want everybody to know what your wishes were and have them documented. You don't necessarily have to fund it ahead of time. Just the fact of you putting it down and having it known is huge. But we are there as a Dignity Memorial provider to help you fund that and lock in today's price. So that is another key thing that you want to do.
Because no prices go down. Seems like they only go up from here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, I do just want to mention my little Spitfire of a 92-year-old grandmother who was 5'2" and probably 90 pounds, but as strong-willed as they come. And I just still remember, it was 2000, so it was 12 years ago, but I still remember sitting in that church and listening to that music and some of the hymns that she chose. And she really left me a gift, because I still hear music today and it reminds me of her. She picked it.
Absolutely.
And so I encourage you all to have these conversations with your loved ones, no matter how hard they are, because you're giving them a final gift if you are the one facing a terminal illness. And if you are the family member left behind, you're giving yourself an ultimate gift to be able to fulfill your loved one's last wishes. So with that, again, if you want to get in touch with Mr. Lynch or Mr. Green, you can contact them at 770-477-7171, and they can connect you to any other market in Phoenix or the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, or anywhere in the United States. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Important information about a difficult topic. I truly appreciate your coming to the show today. I'm Jeannie Pete. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day and week ahead, and listen here same time next week and every week. Homestead Hope Foundation is your resource for a healthy life. God bless.